Heel mooi, ik ben dol op de Joodse cultuur. En het is prachtig. Ik kom hier om te spelen. Ik heb hier dusdanig veel Zionistische uitingen gezien op posters daar en dingen. Dat wij hebben besloten het niet te gaan doen. Ik ben een man, ik sta voor waar ik voor sta. Recht is recht en krom is krom. Ik ben zelf een Amsterdamse Jood, bij wijze van spreken. Ik hou van de Joodse gemeenschap. Ik ben tegen Zionisme en dat is wat daar wordt verkocht. En daardoor kan ik hier nu niet spelen. Sorry. Fijne dag, jongens.
Het heeft ontzettend veel mensen die daar aanwezig waren en daarbuiten en ook mij zeer geraakt. We leven namelijk in een tijd dat het Joods leven enorm onder druk staat. Want wat is het Zionisme nou eigenlijk? Het Zionisme is het recht op een eigen Joodse staat. En waarom is dat zo belangrijk? Omdat we in de Tweede Wereldoorlog hebben gezien wat er kan gebeuren als de hele wereld zich keert tegen Joden.
En nu zit ik hier iedereen ervan te overtuigen dat ik geen antisemiet ben. De leider van de VVD voor jodenhater en dat soort dingen wordt uitgewijd. Maar dat is gewoon super gevaarlijk, man. Dus ik word gewoon met de dood bedreigd.
Ja, verschrikkelijk nieuws. Ik moest er echt bijna van spugen. De Douwe Bob die is onderweg naar het buitenland wegens bedreigingen.
Ja, en niet gewoon zelf. Hij heeft vanmiddag een 112-melding gedaan omdat hij bedreigd werd. En dat er dus blijkbaar ook een acute gevaar was. En hij is nu met zijn gezin in een politieauto onderweg naar het buitenland.
It's now become abundantly clear who controls the world. Because Bob Dylan, a member of an English punk rap duo, just lost everything in less than 24 hours. His talent agency, gone. Visa, revoked. Their US tour, canceled. Why? Because during a performance at Glastonbury, he had the gall to say these words.
Death to the IDF! Death to the IDF!
It's harrowing.
It's absolutely sick, isn't it?
The point is, Bob Dylan has been spewing this kind of anti-establishment, anti-British venom for years, and not a single person in power batted an eye. Because these are all direct quotes uttered by Dylan in the past. Quote, kill the Queen, burn Britannia. I wipe my arse with the UK flag, then spit on the crown. I mean, this guy has said some of the most vile and hateful things about some of the most powerful and revered figures in Britain. And the reaction from the UK elite? That's right, crickets. Not a show canceled, not a revoked visa, not a dropped contract. But the moment he criticizes Israel, even just once, his entire professional life is torched.
There's the effect of intense Israeli lobbying. It is a very powerful force in our society. Those who support the Israeli government through thick and thin have traditionally been very influential.
I strongly condemn these unacceptable acts. Anti-Semitism has absolutely no place in Europe.
And same in the US, you can denigrate the flag, you can criticize Trump, Biden, whoever you want, but the moment you criticize Israel...
It is hatred for the West, it is hatred for the civilization that has granted them all of their power, all of their economic might.
Hell yeah, from the river to the sea, Palestine must be, will be, inshallah, it will be free.
And that, of course, is combined with the reason why they hate Israel. They don't hate Israel just because it's filled with Jews. Of course, that's one reason. They also hate Israel because Israel, they believe, is an extension of the quote-unquote colonialist West.
No one wants to talk about it.
Right, but if you
do talk about it, you're anti-Semitic, which is so strange. Like, yeah, I don't know how they wrangled that.
And this is actually the point of this video. How does Israel do that? This video, which I hope will be part of a series dedicated to uncovering why these Western governments will do anything to protect Israel.
Famous quote: if you want to know who rules over you, find out who you're not allowed to criticize. Because this wasn't just some random overreaction. This is what happens when you criticize the most pampered military force on the planet, backed by one of the most powerful lobbying machines in the entire world.
In AIPAC,
perpetuates the wishes of a corrupt and immoral government that is bombing the shit out of Gaza, bombs hospitals, schools, kids. And then if you criticize them, you live under this fear that you're going to be called some anti-Semite, and it's utter bullshit.
It's been said lately a lot that Gaza helps drop the mask. But I think that's an understatement because Gaza is now like an X-ray. It's allowing us to see the inside of how things work. All the connections between Israel and the powers that be. And it's allowing us to see very clearly just how precious this Israel project is to these powerful people.
The pride of being able to be here and do work in the greatest country on earth, next to Israel. Next to Israel.
Many people are starting to ask, what is it about Israel that gets all these Western governments to abandon everything? Rule of law, human rights, including the rights of their own citizens.
To send all our taxpayer money to Israel, who, by the way, gets free health care subsidized by us. And if your kids in Israel want to go to a higher education, guess what? They don't have to go in debt because it's subsidized by us.
Not only does the U.S. give Israel billions of dollars every year that helps fund their free health care, meanwhile Americans do not receive free health care in the U.S., but Israelis can come to the U.S. for free and receive any medical procedure if the hospital in the U.S. is better or offers something that they can't get in Israel, or if they need an organ donation. And they can come to the U.S. and everything's paid for, their flights paid for, their hospital stay, their medical procedure.
And what makes Israel the red line that no one's allowed to cross? For example, in the case of Bob Dylan, the British punk rap duo, they've been doing this kind of artistic dissent and outrage in their music for a long time.
I mean, is it not bizarre that in the UK you can burn the Union Jack, curse the crown, and still get booked on national TV, but the moment you criticize Israel, you're branded a heretic and banished from society?
Free, free! Honestly, when this story broke out, I didn't want to make a video about Bob Dylan because I thought, what could I add? Everybody's already saying everything. But then I saw what happened to a Dutch singer, Douw Bob, who also had to pay a heavy price for putting the spotlight on Israel's crimes.
Ik ben tegen Zionisme en dat is wat daar wordt verkocht. En daardoor kan ik hier nu niet spelen. Sorry.
And I thought, okay, there's a pattern there. There's a big price to pay when you challenge the Israeli narrative publicly. Especially if you're someone who has a big following in the West. Especially if you're someone who's considered cool, an artist, a musician. So let's get into Douw Bob's story. It all started 2 weekends ago when Douw Bob refused to perform at a Jewish children's football event. The singer had agreed with organizers that there would be no political displays, but he left after seeing what he described as Zionist posters. Bob's cancellation ignited a national controversy.
Ik denk dat het een hele emotionele, heftige reactie is. Ik denk wel dat als we als maatschappij niet oppassen, dat anti-Zionisme wel soms uitmondt nu al in antisemitisme en dat kan vergroten.
Culminating in the leader of the VVD party Dylan accusing Douw of anti-Semitism and referencing World War II.
Kinderen wordt een optreden geweigerd om wie ze zijn, Joods. Zo gewoon is Jodenhaat geworden. Pure haat in het volle zicht.
It must be said that Douw Bob performed last year at the Holocaust Museum, in the height of the genocide. And he also dated someone who was Jewish in the past. So it was so ridiculous to accuse him of being a Jew-hater.
Dat is onzin. Dat is gewoon onzin. De jaren 30 leven helemaal niet. Ze weten geen reet van geschiedenis, maar ze hebben een paar minimale clichés opgepikt waar ze dan misbruik van maken. En omdat de gemiddelde Nederlander ook geen reet ervan af weet, denkt hij, jaren 30, Tweede Wereldoorlog. Kom op. En Duitsland was systematische, gestructureerde anti-Joodse wetgeving. Dat hebben we helemaal niet, mevrouw Jezelkus.
But that fire tweet from Dylan ignited so much controversy and it led to the death threats against him. In particular from a man named Bob T, who is still in police custody. He is the leader of the Amsterdam Defense Force, a conservative group whose declared mission is to protect the Amsterdam culture from expats and outsiders. ADF has publicly supported the Israeli bombings in Gaza and is outspoken in favor of Zwarte Piet. Zwarte Piet is Black Pete. This is basically the Dutch version of blackface. Look it up, Bubala. I don't have time to get into that one. But back to Douw Bob. In a private Instagram chat with Douw Bob, Bob T, the man who's arrested, sent a photo of a location where the singer has lived with his family since 2023. Half of fucking Amsterdam wants your head on a street tile. Lovely. Douw Bob immediately announced that he and his family are leaving the Netherlands. He said on the advice of the police, but the police later said he did it on his own accord. But either way, he was genuinely scared and had to flee. He has since returned and performed at this festival called Gelderpop with a kind of a milquetoast message of, I don't want any more drama, no more politics, all love. Wow, Douw. How radical. Bob Dylan, you are not.
Alright, but have you heard this one though? to the IDF.
Speaking of Bob Dylan, he doubled down on the message, or rather brought it back to the main point, which is Palestine.
Bob Dylan have put a statement out, I think in the last few minutes, but this is the statement. Today, a good many people would have you believe a punk band is the #1 threat to world peace. We are not for the death of Jews. We are for the dismantling of a violent military machine, a machine whose own soldiers were told to use unnecessary lethal force against innocent civilians waiting for aid, a machine that has destroyed much of Gaza. The government doesn't want us to ask why they remain silent in the face of this atrocity. The more time they talk about Bob Dylan, the less time they spend answering for their criminal inaction.
Actually, to go back to Douwe Bob, the Dutch artist, I checked the footage of the concert that he performed after he returned back to the Netherlands. There was no one with a Palestinian flag, no political messages, which was kind of disappointing, but I'm not blaming him, of course, because at the end of the day, maybe a lot of us will act like Douwe Bob in the end and just kind of choose a non-offensive route. Because taking the hard hits and standing up to the powers that be is not for everyone. And actually, I was having this discussion with a friend of mine who works for a company where he had to bring up with his bosses something about collaboration with something that leads back to Israel. And just the how delicate that situation is. And actually, this reminded me of a reaction from the Oscar-winning composer, Hans Zimmer. He made a post which was very pro-Palestine and then later deleted it. But what was very heartwarming is that people said, even though you deleted it under what we assume to be pressure, we still appreciate that you posted that. I say all this to say that maybe at the end of the day, the majority of us are probably more like Douwe Bob and Hans Zimmer than Bob Dylan. We're not fully ready to commit all the way and risk it all. And speaking of which, the consequences here in the Netherlands are very real. We have this organization here called CD, which is the equivalent of ADL. It's kind of a lobby group, an Israeli lobby group, that's constantly documenting anti-Semitism.
Yeah, Centrum Information Documentation Israel.
Tell us about them.
Well, they're actually the biggest Israeli lobby group around. They have just to give you an example, a clear view. These are people that can call the Prime Minister of Holland and they can have him inside their office in 15 minutes, just to make an example. These are the people who target anybody who has a little bit of influence and is pro-Palestinian. These are the people who are directly responsible for the fake narratives that we see in the mass media in the Netherlands. These types of people are very powerful.
Ja, dames en heren, deze week de podcast met een bijzondere gast. Raouf, leraar. Rafi, welkom.
Dankjewel. Ik ben directeur beleid bij de Israel Allies Foundation Europe. Het is een politiek netwerk wat zich wereldwijd, en in mijn geval, want ik werk voor de Europese tak dus in Europa, zich inzet om in zoveel mogelijk parlementen op ons continent politici te verenigen om voor Israël te staan.
Je bent een lobbyist.
Nou, dat is een vies woord tegenwoordig.
Ja, nou dat was het altijd al natuurlijk. Ja.
These are also the people that link companies like Celebrite, like ICTS was?
Yeah, ICTS, which is technically a Dutch company, but it was founded by former personnel of the internal Israeli intelligence agency Shin Bet. Now, ICTS has a massive role in the administering not only of airports in this country, but across Europe, actually.
These are the tentacles of Israel that reside in the Netherlands.
So basically, the consequences are real, and there's a reason why people are afraid to speak up. Now, if you go back to UK and the example of Bob Dylan, one of the other festivals where he was supposed to headline had to drop him.
I had a death threat yesterday. I answered the phone, and it was an unknown number. Asked if it was me, and I feel stupid in hindsight, so I was like, yes. And then they just said, immediate bunch of absolutely vile things, and I just said, I'm not engaging with this, and I was quite shocked. And then it finished with, we know who you are, we know what you look like, we know where you're going to be, do you feel safe, watch your back. I cannot express clearly enough that I wanted Bob Dylan to perform at our festival. It became apparent that there was not an option for Bob Dylan to step on stage on Saturday. The choice was either, put very bluntly to us, we could continue with Bob Dylan as our headliner. If we continued with Bob Dylan as our headliner, we wouldn't have the festival happening on Saturday.
But despite all this fear-mongering, people are waking up. In the UK, where artists are refusing to perform at the festivals that have dropped Bob Dylan, but also here in the Netherlands. Just check out the statements of the people who are reacting to that party leader that accused Douwe Bob, the Dutch singer, of anti-Semitism.
Oké, Dylan. We gaan het proberen heel langzaam uit te leggen, zodat ook jij het snapt. Als een zanger zegt, ik voel me er niet prettig bij om op te treden op een kinderfeestje wat gehijacked wordt voor politieke belangen en Zionisme ondersteunt, wil niet zeggen dat die persoon een jodenhater is. Wanneer iemand zegt, ik ondersteun genocide niet, wil dat niet zeggen dat diegene ook tegen het Joodse volk of het Joodse geloof is. Dylan, probeer dit heel langzaam voor jezelf na te spreken, misschien dat je het dan snapt.
Hearing stuff like this gives me hope. Like I attended the march in The Hague last month, which had more than 100,000 people. And the follow-up to it had 150,000 people. And I was looking around and I'm like, okay, so people are waking up. Yet, the genocide still continues. Which brings us back to the point of this video, which is actually, I'm just going to touch on in this first video because the whole series is going to be dedicated to that. But the point is, why won't any of these Western governments stand in the way of Israel's genocide? Why do they keep pretending that any criticism of the army carrying out this genocide is anti-Semitic?
Israel is responsible for one of the cruelest genocides in modern history. At the same time, since October 2023, the Tel Aviv Stock Exchange has soared by 213% in US dollars, amassing 225.7 billion US dollars in market gains.
At this point, it's starting to become clear that this army is not just protecting Jews, it's actually protecting a project that's very near and dear to the hearts of those powers that be. So then we keep returning back to the same question. What is so special about this project? Is it that it tests weapons and surveillance that the oligarchy invests in?
There's two main reasons why I think America should be spending money and keep funding
Should or
Israel.
should not?
Should. The first is that Israel is on the forefront of technology, especially with the military, since they are constantly at war and they are constantly developing new technologies that America might need in the future with Russia or China or future wars.
And in fact, as I mentioned in my remarks, Canada has continued to trade with Israel and actually provide lethal weapons technologies. And in the backdrop of the Foreign Affairs Minister last year, Melanie Joly, saying that there is an arms embargo, but when in fact there has not been.
Or is it a military base for the US, like the eyes and ears of the US in the region?
It is the best $3 billion investment we make. Were there not an Israel, the United States of America would have to invent an Israel to protect her interest.
Israel is the single greatest strength America has in the Middle East. I always say to my friends when they say those things to you, I say, imagine our circumstance in the world were there no Israel. How many battleships would there be? How many troops would be stationed?
The Middle East holds the world's oil lifeline, and the West built an empire on stealing it. First, they came for trade routes. Then they invented the term Middle East, a British label masking the theft of $45 trillion from India. When oil was discovered in Iran, Iraq, Saudi Arabia, the golden goose was caged. The real game began. Sykes-Picot, Balfour Declaration, and warships. How to dominate the region without seeming to. Enter Israel, a Western-engineered stop station for control. Zionism became the perfect tool, justifying endless intervention while laundering Western anti-Semitism onto Arabs and Muslims.
You know, I used to say, early on when I was a kid, I'd say, when I was a young senator, I'd say, if I were a Jew, I'd be a Zionist. I am a Zionist. You don't have to be a Jew to be a Zionist.
The West calls itself civilized while drenched in blood. It needs Palestine to paint Arabs and Muslims as barbarians, justifying eternal theft, a hunger to reclaim lands Christianity lost. Israel is the battering ram for exceptionalism and fictional universalism. Gaza's genocide is no mistake. It's the brutal logic of 100-plus years of colonial design.
Is that why all the powers that be won't tolerate any criticism of Israel? Or is it because they get paid?
Representative Laura Gillen, $94,905. Representative Adriano Esbiala, $202,000. Representative Tom Swazi, $312,000. Representative Dan Goldman, $366,000. Representative Gregory Meeks, $690,000. Representative Grace Mean, $619,000. Senator Kirsten Gillibrand, almost $1 million, coming in at $997,000. Representative Richie Torres, $1.5 million. Senator Chuck Schumer, $1.7 million. Hakeem Jeffries, $1.7 million.
Biden himself is probably the leading. It's not just that he's the biggest recipient of AIPAC aid in Senate history. He was the person whose State Department delisted the Kahana movement from the State Department list of terrorist groups. Netanyahu needed him to take them off the terrorist list. Why? Because he wanted to bring Ben-Gvir into his government. So he couldn't have an official open terrorist as his police minister. Biden did him the favor.
Or do they get blackmailed?
Here's a deep dive on Jeffrey Epstein and his relations to Israeli Mossad. Back in 2020, former Israeli military intelligence officer Ari Ben Menashe stated directly in his book that Jeffrey Epstein was an Israeli Mossad spy. Ben Menashe alleges they ran a, quote, honeypot operation, providing young girls to politicians for blank, and then using the incidents to blackmail them for Israeli intelligence. Ben Menashe also states that Jeffrey Epstein was connected to Israeli intelligence through Robert Maxwell. Jeffrey Epstein's longtime associate Ghislaine Maxwell is the daughter of the famous media mogul and Israeli spy Robert Maxwell. The 2003 book Robert Maxwell and Israel Super Spy by Gordon Thomas and Martin Dillon, the book details how Maxwell helped the Mossad steal intelligence gathering software from the US and then sold it around the world.
So this is the stuff that I'll be exploring in this series. But the point is, Israel is not a country. Israel is a project. And these powers that be that care about this project don't care about Jews. Are we supposed to believe that these sociopaths, who won't even acknowledge that kids are being slaughtered every day, care about the well-being of Jews? Like, who are we kidding? And I would even go as far as saying that these powers that be are anti-Semitic themselves. Take, for example, Sweden's migration minister, who cut all the UNRWA funding, which is the lifeline of Palestinians, and is calling for deporting anyone who's pro-Palestinian, because according to him, that's anti-Semitic. So this man, his own son, is a neo-Nazi. And this faux outrage about anti-Semitism is very much alive and well here in Europe.
It isn't the only British institution in clean-up mode today. With hindsight, the BBC now says it should have pulled the plug on this iPlayer live stream on Saturday.
Oh, dude, they're going to fucking put this dude in jail, by the way.
That the sentiments expressed by punk act Bob Vylan, who led the crowd in a chant of death to Israel's army, the IDF, were anti-Semitic and unacceptable.
So for context, let's consider why this chant towards the IDF. This IDF, this army, is the same army that plays with the toys of the children they killed. Don't you love the one on the corner where he has the toy near his crotch? Lovely touch, lovely detail. And the innocent Israeli public who support the IDF with their lives and run cover for them are well aware of the crimes because they're aware that they need to hide those crimes from the world. Check out this woman who posted about a dating profile that she found with someone who said he had a dog from Gaza bring him the leg of one of the Palestinians. And then this woman tells him, like, watch it. People will read this tweet. He's like, no, it's just a terrorist leg.
And they love the idea of victimhood and what comes with it, which is vengeance. The idea is we are taking vengeance against almost all of humanity because we were persecuted and hated by everybody. So now it is our turn to show strength. And this is part of the you surrender and you surrender and you surrender. This is almost an infantile. This is a 2 or 3 year old. They see things from a very twisted and distorted mystical lens. So nothing ever happens in the present. Everything happens on a symbolic, historical plane of time. This is not today.
Why should the world tolerate you having nuclear weapons and not, say, Iran?
First, again, we never admitted to have such weapons. But the very comparison is, I must say, it's very insulting, and I tell you why. We suffered one Holocaust. We listened to our neighbors.
Is it because of the Holocaust that you should be allowed to have nuclear weapons?
You know what? This interview was finished now. Your attitude is so hostile.
This is the eternal struggle between the good part of the universe which Jews represent and the bad part of the universe that everybody else represents. And this is part of the eternal persecution and hatred of Jews. And if you listen to Zionist speakers, this is how they talk.
But my message to you as British audience watching that, those people marching in London supporting those horrors of Hamas are supporting pure evil. You cannot support pure evil. This is such a simple moral decision to make.
But I think
it's still fairly clear who the good and bad guys are, if I can reduce it to that.
Yeah.
And, the good guys are definitely not the Ayatollahs of Iran. And I think we need to be grateful that the Israelis have led the way on this. Israel has had such an absolute, kind of public relations beating.
I can't be not being emotional. This is definitely something that will change Israel forever. Some people compare it to 9/11. I would say, in proportion, when you take the numbers, it's bigger because Israel is such a small population.
They really are ashamed of nothing and offended by everything. Speaking of this UK ambassador, here she is with Yvette Cooper, one of the British politicians who managed to get Palestine Action classified as a terror group. By the way, this Yvette Cooper received more than £200,000 last year from the Israeli lobby. For people like that, I doubt there is any ideological drive behind their support for Israel. They're just doing what they're paid to do when they try to ban all the voices that stand up for Palestine. But there are others who don't get paid, yet continue to support Israel. And I believe racism is at the heart of that.
Why are we sitting in a city where you allow maniacs on the streets to unbelievably spit on the reputation of this country? There are people on your streets who always attack Israel first but never last. That's not Israel's problem. That's your problem. And it's a problem you've allowed to get out of hand. And I want these people to be told very clearly, if you do not like it here and want to be part of the Western society, go somewhere else. Go somewhere else.
And I believe it's blind racism that they're not even aware of. Because they really cannot fathom the idea of anyone standing up for Palestine because it's the moral thing to do.
Your moral compass is sent spinning because of this stupid chant and not because of premature babies being left to decompose in a hospital, then I'm sorry, but you are completely wrong in the head. This is, and also this conflation of the IDF with the Israeli people or the Jewish people is irresponsible. People at home will have seen video upon video of IDF soldiers gleefully talking about detonating hospitals and schools and whatever else and doing the work.
Okay, that's why we are trying to get peace in the area against terrorists.
It's a genocide.
And by killing the
and
IDF,
by killing all the kids.
Terrorists.
Killing the kids is going to get us peace, is it? Killing the kids is going to get us peace, is it?
Because they don't even think of Palestinians. That doesn't even factor. They don't see them. That's how racist they are. To them, Palestinians are just a nuisance. Let's just get that out of the way so we can go back to our scheduled programming.
This guy, Villain, was saying kill IDF soldiers a couple of weeks before.
Is Glastonbury safe in the BBC's hands?
No. Thank goodness at the end for Lulu and Rod Stewart. And that sort of saved the whole thing, didn't it, really?
Thank God for the white entertainers in the end. My God, that's so fucking cringe. They really can't see that they're racists.
When it starts going out like that, and you start waving Palestinian flags and you're starting to... Why wasn't the feed cut? Why didn't they pull the plug?
Well, and here's the extraordinary thing. Do you know how many staff the BBC had at Glastonbury? 400! Why did no one exercise any discretion at all? I would suggest, Shana, it's because so many people that work from the BBC come from the same background and have the same views.
And this blindness to the idea that all this is rooted in what's happening in Palestine. That's why people are angry and chanting and doing all this activism. This blindness is also present in Israeli Jews, who believe that this Israel project is actually out to protect them. Or even Jews around the world.
Leonard, jij was erbij op dit voetbaltoernooi met jouw dochter.
Ja.
Zoals gezegd, Jessicus noemt het meermaals een stomp in de maag van die kinderen. Wat heb jij tegen je dochter gezegd? Hoe heb je uitgelegd wat er gebeurde?
Ja, ik vond het een van de pijnlijkste momenten van de afgelopen tijd die ik heb meegemaakt. Omdat het echt voor die kinderen een hard gelach was. We gingen allemaal, het was pauze in het voetbaltoernooi. En we gingen met z'n allen, liepen we dus naar het podium toe. En toen gebeurde dit. En er waren honderden kinderen van, mijn dochter is 10 jaar oud. En we waren daar toch wel erg door aangeslagen dat er dat daar een politieke discussie werd gevoerd op dat moment.
It's incredible how Palestinian children don't even factor to him. Of course the fear of your daughter is real, but so is the fear of the Palestinian children as well, which is even more severe.
Omdat het echt voor die kinderen een hard gelach was. Omdat het echt voor die kinderen een hard gelach was.
Yeah, I'm sorry that your daughter is going through this. And actually, if you weren't brainwashed yourself, you'd see that both your daughter and Palestinian girls, or daughters of Palestinian fathers, they're both victims of this project called Israel. But of course he won't see that, because it's like the blind leading the blind. Because this man was there at the event with his daughter, right? And he couldn't protect his daughter from what that singer did. Like, how am I supposed to explain this to my daughter? Actually, you're supposed to take this as an opportunity to explain to your daughter why this Zionist propaganda shouldn't be at a football match. Why is this project trying to recruit her and other Jews to join that army? That's a good opportunity to discuss that. But of course he doesn't want to see that. And this is what Bob the singer was against when he talked about the Zionist propaganda.
Ik ben tegen Zionisme en dat is wat daar wordt verkocht. En daardoor kan ik hier nu niet spelen. Sorry.
And Zionist propaganda promotes this idea of Israel's security, which is actually about promoting the Israeli army, promoting serving in the army.
Let's not forget, Ash, that the majority of the population of Israel are in the IDF, including teenagers.
And whose fault is that?
If an army is committing genocide and slaughtering babies and creating the highest rate of child amputees in the world, and if that is what they have done for months and years now, and then the public is rightfully outraged about that
calling
genocide.
For their death, that's the issue.
Again, they didn't say death to Israelis, they said death to the IDF. Again,
who are Israelis.
Genocide.
It's a compulsory service. We have to join the army in Israel.
Again, whose fault is that? I love how they think that that's an argument for their case, when in reality that should be the argument against Israel. Why does that country force every single person to join the army? That's the problem. That's what you should be questioning.
When he was chanting death, death to the IDF, he was essentially calling for the genocide of Jews living in Israel. I mean, I don't think he should be prosecuted, to be clear, but nevertheless, I think it was pretty unsavory.
Unsavory? Do you want to know what's unsavory?
When there is a war, it doesn't matter who your enemy is, you need to destroy their offspring to prevent them from creating more offspring.
But I want to bring it back to the Jews who are scared.
Kijk, ik wil er ook wel bij zeggen dat de Joden in Nederland het op het ogenblik heel zwaar hebben. Dat is echt niet onzin of zo. Voor de Joodse scholen staan mannen met machinegeweren.
And again, the question is, why do you feel under threat? Why all this police? Why aren't you questioning why all that is there?
Zionism thrives off of anti-Semitism. Zionist organizations rely on anti-Semitism to pay their bills. Look at the Anti-Defamation League. Without anti-Semitism, which they constantly inflate to the point where over 50% of their documented anti-Semitic incidents since October 7th are simply pro-Palestine rallies, peace rallies, it's pretty obvious that they need anti-Semitism to exist. And so Israel is actually an engine of anti-Semitism. So I see Zionism as a kind of cult that is not only hostile to Muslims and Christians that live within its realm, but to Jews who live across the world and want to just be normal Jews here.
So it's done by design, making the world feel unsafe for Jews and actually fueling hatred of Jews. How else will you keep growing that base and expanding? Because Israel is an expansionist project.
All of you are invited to make it your home. Study Hebrew, study everything else, anything you want. But learn one thing. This is always your home.
All the way to the north. Border with Lebanon, Syria, and hallelujah, which is actually included in the Promised Land. Can you believe it? All of Lebanon is included in the Promised Land.
Our borders will extend from Lebanon to the Great Desert, which is Saudi Arabia, and then from the Mediterranean to the Euphrates.
So the mission is to expand Israel from what it is today.
Also, yes.
To expand into Syria, into Egypt.
Exactly.
Are you excited about these plans?
I'm very excited.
So how do you keep growing it? By populating it with more people. And how else will you convince people to move to this hellhole, this very unsafe hellhole? By making their lives abroad hell. And how do you make their lives abroad hell? By triggering anti-Semitism everywhere.
Because from the start, their main goal is, as I said, for Israel to become an empire, for that to happen, they want to extinguish the diaspora. They want all Jews to move to Israel. They're explicitly saying so. And they admit that America, Kahana admits that Jews have not had it as good in any part of the world, in any part of history, than they did then in the United States of America and do today. And so how are you going to convince Jews who have it good to abandon the American dream to move and become an Israeli? How are you going to do that? Well, the way you do it is by putting the fear of anti-Semitism in. For example, Irv Rubin, who is national chairman of the Jewish Defense League for many years in the Los Angeles area, he and his crew, they would go to a Jewish cemetery and they would topple over headstones.
Right.
Because then the next day they could say, "Whoa, look at these Nazis toppling over headstones. We need a Jewish defense force to come and patrol the area. Jews aren't safe here."
You see how cynical this project is? So godless in how it continues to use Judaism as a cover as it carries out its expansion and genocide and apartheid. And this is historic, by the way. Zionism relying on anti-Semitism.
Can you give us an overview of the historical relationship between the Zionist movement and the Nazis, and why you think it's important to keep talking about this today as we're seeing what's unfolding in Gaza?
The Zionists in Germany were just 2% of the German Jewish population, but the Zionist leadership welcomed the Nazis to power. They saw in it a golden opportunity for their own movement because they knew in times of peace they could not move the Jewish masses to support Zionism. But the advent of Hitler presented them with those golden opportunities. It stimulated the emigration of Jews from Nazi Germany, and 50,000 of them went to Palestine. Zionism and anti-Semitism were twins of a kind. Without anti-Semitism, there is no Zionism. When the mass of Jews boycotted everything German, there was a weakening of the Nazis. I mean, there was speculation they wouldn't last the winter of 1933. And the Zionists were horror-stricken because that's the last thing that they wanted. So they agreed to a transfer agreement called Habarah in August 1933, which broke the boycott of Nazi Germany, because what they were doing was selling the German goods in Palestine and then elsewhere as well. And 60% of the foreign investment in the Zionist economy between 1933 and 1939 came from Nazi Germany.
And that's something we're going to explore in depth in this series. So more on that in a few weeks. Because by the way, my next video, the one that's coming up immediately after this, is my theater show that I performed last year. It's called All About Me and My Mother, and I can't wait to share that with you. It's been nominated for a big prize here in the Netherlands. Finger crossed I win in October. But anyway, I'm gonna release that in a couple of weeks, and then we're gonna go back to this series. And in the meantime, by the way, I'd still do my creativity coaching. So if you want a taste of that, of all these creative things that I do on the stage, and on the page, and on YouTube, and check your spam folder, by the way, because if you're requesting coaching, sometimes the emails go to your spam folder. And for now, I want to finish off with a message of hope. Even though they're trying to cancel all this dissent and standing up for Palestine, like they tried to cancel basically all the livelihood of this Bob villain, because their label dropped them. So they started their own label, and now their album is #1 in the UK. That really reminds me of that little video by Britney Spears when she does the little fuck you, like with her finger. It's giving that, babes. So the powers that be can keep suppressing, but till when?
What this means is that we stay strategic, is that we stay together, is that we remember that we can outmaneuver them. We do, we resist. And whatever that looks like, this feeling that we have fostered together as a movement in these past 20 months won't go away.
كتير يعني الطيور
العصافير بحبها يعني لأنه عندها حرية وبتطير وبتغرد وبتسافر كمان في الصبح بتغني وبتسقسق. احنا في غزة يعني زي الطير المحبوس بقفص، ولا بيمشي ولا بيروح ولا بيحكي ولا بيطير ولا بيسافر ولا بتنفس، محبوس بقفص والقفص فيه أحزان.
Hey, the Israeli army yesterday posted that we are in Gaza not allowed to enter the sea, to touch the water, to swim or even to fish, knowing that fishing is the only way, the only source of fresh food, fresh protein. So I came today and I thought I will just find the sea empty and sad. But look at this. Look at the children. How relieved. So happy to find all of them. But we're still enjoying it. Yesterday, I heard also a saying, a comment under a poster talking about the Israeli prevention of swimming, that if they were able to control the air, they would definitely prevent it from us. And that's true. That's true. All means of life, all of them are targeted and are prohibited. They're not allowed for Gazans.